Okay, so I've got the text called Bat, and it's written by Valerie Warble, and it comes from the sort of gathering of short stories called New Stories from the Southwest, and it's about a prostitute. Of we don't know her name, um, and it kind of starts out with this married man that we later found out is called John, who comes to her for her services, I guess you could say. And he ends up getting quite emotional because he says that his wife is sick from cancer. But our main character can then relate because she's got a very close friend called um, Jan Janet, who used to have cancer. They sort of talk about it, but it is quite a strange situation for a prostitute to actually talk about these things. And the man then leaves his wallet, um, and the main character goes home, and then she discovers that the wife of which he spoke of is actually one of her old school friends, quite close friend. And then, that means that then she can't sleep because she's thinking about it, and also in general she's not that good at sleeping. And she then discovers a bat in her trailer, which is kind of one of the big scenes because it makes her freak out, and she has to act on something that she really doesn't like, and it makes her get all these connotations to some other episodes in her life that she actually saw. Then she meets John again, and she's constantly reminded about her childhood now that she knows that his wife Laurie is actually an old friend. And they keep on talking, and they actually get a little bit closer this time. And when our main character then gets home once again, the text ends um, with our main character actually calling home to tell Laurie, as far as the reader can see, that uh, her husband is actually coming to her, and that she kind of makes contact once again. And from there on, I would like to talk about the composition, the characters, and that is our main character and John, the setting, and then kind of draw a perspective to a different kind of text that kind of revolves around the same thing, I guess you could say. Um, right. The composition, it starts in medias res because it starts out right uh, in the middle of the scene where John is visiting our main character. This can be seen right from the beginning. The rending sound when I unzip his pants make us both flinch. It starts out right in the middle, and it sort of all the way through the text. It jumps back and forth through the times because our main character is currently is reminded all the time about her childhood, which makes her mind go back and forth through different scenes. Um, and this is seen. Um, oh, I'm sorry. Right here, just as an example, this is this part of the story. She goes back a bit afterwards. Um, um, it goes back to the conversation about Laurie and her treatment, and how John is really upset about the fact that she's not really getting the treatment that he wants because she's holding back, and she's not really the same person anymore at all. But this confusion back and forth in time could also point to the fact that our main character is quite confused and is a place in life as in of which um, she might be just as confused as John in the current situation, but she kind of plays it off more cool, and I'll get back to that later. And the story, it ends up with an open ending. And as I said, it's when she decides to actually call Laurie, and it is right here. And it actually ends with the sentence, "and I wait." Uh, and this in itself points out, of course, to the fact that it leaves some stuff for thought for the reader, and kind of keeps the story going even when it's finished. And this way, this also shows that throughout the story, our main character goes kind of through a development. She goes from just being a normal prostitute who, I guess, might not want to actually listen to the things that John is saying, but as she discovers things underway and kind of is reminded of her childhood, she actually gets to a place where she does quite a good deed, um, for her own cause, but also for the relationships cause. And as we're talking about the main character, as I said, it's quite easy for her to move on in the story and go back and forth. It doesn't seem to kind of create any problems, and she can jump right back. That is, of course, also due to the writer, but still, she appears in the beginning as this very quite normal prostitute, but quite relaxed about her profession. It's just as it is, and talks very openly about it. Um, which I mean is quite odd, I guess. And they're set up in quite a small town, and she's okay with everything. Um, John, on the other hand, is a middle-aged man with a sick wife, and he is quite broken, but also as an opposite to our main character, he's described a lot more. Just for example, in the beginning, this one has wavy hair and a dimple on his chin. I bet his mother never stopped telling him. Um, with a little pinch to the chin, and a pleased sight that her boy was the handsomest around. This also shows, of course, that she is kind of quite observing, um, but there aren't really any description of the main character, and we don't even know her name. So she's quite relaxed about her profession, but also quite anonymous, actually. And these two characters kind of opposite each other throughout the text, which creates quite a nice dynamic feeling in text. Also, the setting of the text is quite odd. It's in a town, sorry, called Quartzsite, and our main character lives in a trailer park, and it all seems very temporary, um, which points to the fact that maybe she wants to actually move on in life. Maybe it's not something that she wants to continue doing, um, and that it's just basically for the money at the moment. Also, because in the text she says that she can't really sleep, so that might also just point to the fact. And also the name of the town, Quartzsite, could also kind of lead to the fact that quartz is quite a, I guess you said, valuable thing for jewelry, but it's not the best thing that you could use. It's quite hard. Um, so once again, I mean, the main character's life at this very moment, it isn't quite as glamorous as it could be, and as I said, it is quite temporary. So once again, it might be pointing towards the fact that she's looking for something better further in her time. And then I would like to draw a perspective, and that is to the 13th chapter of the first epistle to the Corinthians in the New Testament of the Christian Bible. And just one second. Yeah, and that text, it's quite a lot different from this one because love in this one is not described as good. There's a broken relationship between Laurie and John, and our main character isn't really finding any love at all with the man she's together, and there's no one in her life. And also, of course, she's a prostitute. But in the other text, is the fact that love is very strong and it's universal and it can be found everywhere and it will always quote protect, trusts, hopes, and perseveres. So it's quite a lot different from what we see in the text, which also means, of course, that it is a text about love and the things that love can do and end up with, but it's also a text that shows kind of the worst side of it. Whereas this third 13th chapter is kind of a glorified version of love. So they are two very strong opposites.